An ordinary man saw a woman crying at the airport. He never imagined that she would be his future. Before we explore all the details of this incredible story, tell us where you're following us from and the time. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss a thing, and let's embark on this journey together. The steady hum of Atlanta International Airport's Terminal B wrapped around Daria Simone Ellison like a cocoon of white noise. She sat alone at gate B23, a cup of untouched coffee growing cold between her hands. The copper-tipped curls of her natural hair caught the morning sunlight, streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows, creating a halo effect that contrasted sharply with the heaviness in her eyes. Her earth-toned maxi dress and vintage leather jacket spoke of someone who knew exactly who she was, or at least who she had been before life stripped away her certainties. The delicate cursive tattoo on her wrist peeked out from beneath her sleeve. "Still I rise," a reminder she needed now more than ever. Final boarding call for flight 2187 to Los Angeles. The announcement crackled overhead, but Daria didn't move. Her ticket was for a different flight, to a different escape. Denver one way, a city where nobody knew her name or the weight of the silence she carried. She traced the rim of her coffee cup, remembering the morning she'd packed her bags. There had been no dramatic fight, no tearful goodbye, just the quiet realization that she'd spent 3 years of her life trying to shrink herself to fit into someone else's idea of love. 3 years of, maybe you're being too sensitive and you take everything so personally, until she started believing that her feelings were the problem. A child's laughter cut through her thoughts. Across the terminal, a little girl with bouncing blonde curls twirled in circles, her pink backpack swinging wildly. Behind her, a tall man in a worn flannel shirt and faded jeans watched with the careful attention of a single parent. "Harper, stay where I can see you, butterfly." His voice carried across the space, deep and gentle. Daria found herself studying them, the father and daughter. There was something about the way he looked at his child, a mixture of complete devotion and barely concealed exhaustion that spoke of late nights and early mornings, of bedtime stories and breakfast juggling acts. The man must have felt her gaze because he looked up, meeting her eyes. For a moment, neither looked away. His eyes were an unusual shade of blue-gray, like storm clouds breaking. He offered a small, almost apologetic smile before turning back to his daughter. Daria checked her phone. No messages, no missed calls, no one wondering where she was going or when she'd be back. The freedom should have felt liberating. Instead, it sat heavy in her chest, alongside the other truth she never spoke about, the loss that had hollowed her out 18 months ago. The little girl's twirling had brought her closer to Daria's seat. She stumbled, dizzy from her spinning, and giggled as she caught herself on the edge of an empty chair. "Having fun?" Daria found herself asking, the words surprising her as much as they seemed to surprise the child. "I'm practicing for when we get to Denver," the girl announced proudly. "Daddy says it snows there, and I want to know what it feels like to be a snowflake." Denver, the same destination printed on Daria's ticket. Harper, the father, had approached, his height more imposing up close, though his posture suggested someone trying to take up less space rather than more. "I hope she's not bothering you." "Not at all," Daria replied, her voice softer than she intended. "We're apparently heading to the same place." He nodded, then noticed her untouched coffee. Something flickered across his face. Recognition, perhaps, of the kind of morning that led to cold coffee and distant stares. "I was about to grab a fresh cup," he said, gesturing to the cafe behind them. "Would you like one? Seems like you could use it." Daria's first instinct was to decline. She'd spent too long learning the hard way that kindness often came with strings attached, but there was something in the way he stood, not too close, hands in his pockets, ready to accept either answer, that made her pause. "I'm Silas," he added into her silence, "and you've met my daughter, the aspiring snowflake." A smile tugged at the corner of Daria's mouth, small but real. "Daria," she offered in return. And yes, actually, her fresh coffee would be nice. As Silas walked to the cafe, Harper climbed into the seat next to Daria, her energy somehow both boundless and contained. "I like your hair," the girl declared. "It looks like a sunset." Daria touched her copper-tinted curls self-consciously. "Thank you. I like your—" but she looked closer at the child's wrist. "Friendship bracelet." Harper beamed, holding up her arm to show off the colorful beaded creation. "I made it in kindergarten. The blue ones are for good dreams, and the yellow ones are for when you're scared but pretending not to be." The honesty of children, Daria thought, always so disarming. That's very wise, she said. Do they work? Sometimes, Harper shrugged. But Daddy says it's okay when they don't, because being brave isn't about not being scared. It's about doing things even when you are. Silas returned with 3 cups, a coffee for Daria, one for himself, and what looked like hot chocolate for Harper. As he handed Daria her cup, their fingers brushed briefly, an accidental touch that shouldn't have meant anything. But in that moment, surrounded by the chaos of an airport morning, it felt like a full stop in a run-on sentence. Thank you, she said, and meant it for more than just the coffee. Flight 3492 to Denver is now boarding priority passengers and families with small children. The announcement system crackled to life. Harper jumped up, nearly spilling her hot chocolate. That's us, Daddy. Silas gathered their carry-on bags, then turned to Daria. What's your seat number? She pulled out her crumpled boarding pass. 14A. A small smile played at the corners of his mouth. 14B, he said. Harper's in 14C. Looks like the universe has a sense of humor. As they walked toward the boarding gate together, Daria felt something shift inside her chest. Not healing, she knew enough about grief to know it wasn't that simple, but perhaps a crack in the silence, a small space where light might eventually find its way in. Behind them, her abandoned cup of cold coffee sat on the airport chair, a lipstick mark on the rim, the only evidence that someone had once sat there, gathering the courage to begin again. The boarding line moved slowly, a shuffle of feet and rolling suitcases. Harper held onto her father's hand, occasionally spinning under his arm like a dancer, her backpack bumping against other passengers. Sorry, Silas would murmur each time, though no one seemed particularly bothered by the child's exuberance. Daria watched them, thinking about how love could look so different from what she'd been taught to expect. Here was a man who apologized for his daughter's joy taking up space, while never once asking her to contain it. As they reached the gate agent, Daria pulled out her ID along with her boarding pass. The woman scanning tickets smiled at Harper's impromptu dance moves before checking their documents. Have a good flight, she said, and Daria could have sworn the woman winked at her, as if they shared some secret about the strange ways fate sometimes worked. Walking down the jet bridge, Harper reached for Daria's hand with her free one. The gesture was so natural, so unconsciously trusting, that Daria found herself accepting it before her usual defenses could kick in. And so they entered the plane together, a man carrying too much responsibility, a woman carrying too much silence, and a child carrying enough hope for all of them, connected by nothing more than coincidence and cold coffee on a Tuesday morning in Atlanta. None of them could have known then how this moment would unfold, how a random seat assignment would become the first line of a story none of them expected to tell. But perhaps that's how all the best stories begin, not with grand gestures or destined meetings, but with small choices and the courage to say yes to possibility. Harper squeezed Daria's hand as they found their row, and for the first time in longer than she could remember, Daria squeezed back. The descent into Denver International Airport painted the Rocky Mountains in shades of purple and gold, a view that made Harper press her face against the window until her breath fogged the glass. The 3-hour flight had passed in a strange bubble of familiar unfamiliarity. Silas reading a dog-eared paperback, Harper coloring in her sketchbook, and Daria pretending she wasn't hyper-aware of every accidental brush of Silas's arm against hers. Look, Daddy, the mountains look like they're wearing crowns. Harper's excitement drew smiles from nearby passengers. She turned to Daria, her green-blue eyes wide. Did you know that Denver is exactly 1 mile high? That's why they call it the Mile High City. Is that so? Daria found herself warming to the child's enthusiastic knowledge-sharing, even as anxiety about her impulsive decision to leave Atlanta tightened around her chest. 5,000 or 280 feet, Silas added, marking his place in his book with a receipt. Harper's been studying Colorado facts since we decided to move here. The plane touched down with a gentle bump, and reality started seeping back in. Daria had no plan beyond checking into the extended stay hotel she'd booked, no job lined up, no friends to call, just the savings from her years of careful budgeting and the desperate need to start over. As they taxied to the gate, Harper pulled out a slightly crumpled drawing and held it out to Daria. This is for you. It's us on the plane. See? I made your hair extra sparkly because it looks like magic in the sun. Daria accepted the paper, something catching in her throat at the simple kindness of being included in this child's world. The drawing showed 3 stick figures, one tall with brown hair, one small with yellow curls, and one with a mass of copper-colored spirals that did indeed look magical. "Thank you, Harper. This is beautiful." Silas watched the exchange with an expression Daria couldn't quite read. "We're heading to Grove District," he said as passengers around them began gathering their belongings. "There's a great coffee shop there, if you'd like to get that proper cup we never finished in Atlanta." The invitation hung in the air between them. Daria knew the sensible answer would be no. She'd just escaped one situation where she'd lost herself. The last thing she needed was to get tangled in someone else's life. But before she could decline, Harper spoke up. "Please come. They have the best hot chocolate, and Daddy says we need to make friends here because it's our fresh start too." Something in those words, fresh start, echoed against Daria's own reasons for being here. She looked at Silas, who shrugged with a half-smile that suggested he was used to his daughter's direct approach to life. "No pressure," he said softly, "but sometimes the best plans are the ones we don't make." The plane had emptied considerably while they talked. Daria found herself nodding. "Okay, one coffee." They made their way through the terminal, Harper skipping between them and pointing out every dog she saw in the pet relief area. At baggage claim, Silas efficiently collected their luggage, 2 medium-sized suitcases and a child's rolling bag, decorated with constellation patterns. "The rest is being shipped," he explained, catching Daria's questioning look. "Easier to start fresh with less baggage." Literal and otherwise. The knowing tone in his voice made Daria wonder what kind of baggage he was leaving behind. She collected her own 2 bags, grateful she'd had the presence of mind to ship her baking equipment ahead to the hotel. Outside, the April air was crisp and thin, carrying the promise of spring but still holding winter's bite. Harper twirled on the sidewalk, her earlier airplane prediction coming true as tiny snowflakes began to fall. "Look, the sky is dancing." She threw her head back, tongue out to catch the flakes. Silas helped load their bags into his pre-arranged rental car, a practical SUV that had clearly seen better days. "We can drop your bags at your hotel first," he offered. "The Grove's on the way to our new place." Daria hesitated only briefly before giving him the address of her extended stay. As they drove through the city, she watched the unfamiliar landscape scroll past her window. The mountains loomed in the distance, massive and ancient, making her feel simultaneously small and somehow safe. Harper filled the drive with commentary about everything she saw: the gold dome of the Capitol building, the strange blue horse statue with glowing red eyes near the airport. "His name is Lucifer, and he's actually cursed," she informed Daria with delighted horror, "and every dog being walked on every street corner." At the hotel, Silas insisted on helping with her bags despite her protests. The lobby was generic but clean, with landscape paintings on the walls and a bowl of apples at the front desk that had seen better days. "We'll wait here while you check in," he said, and something about the way he said "we'll wait" instead of "I'll wait" made Daria's heart do a strange little skip. The check-in process was quick, and soon they were back in the car heading toward the Grove District. The neighborhood, when they arrived, was a charming mix of old and new, historic buildings housing modern businesses, trees lining the streets despite the urban setting. The coffee shop Silas had mentioned was called Wooden Spoon, a cozy space with exposed brick walls and mismatched furniture that looked like it had been collected from a dozen different estate sales. The smell of freshly ground coffee and baked goods wrapped around them as they entered. "Welcome to Wooden Spoon," called out a barista with vibrantly purple hair. "Oh hey, you must be Silas. Mabel said you'd be starting next week." Daria looked at him questioningly as they approached the counter. "I'll be doing their equipment maintenance," he explained, "plus some barista training. It's part of why we chose this neighborhood. The owner's an old friend of my sister's." They found a table near a window, where Harper immediately began arranging sugar packets into elaborate patterns. The snowflakes outside had thickened, creating a soft white curtain that made the inside of the coffee shop feel like a separate world. "Sayunt," Silas said as their drinks arrived, an almond milk latte for Daria, black coffee for him, and hot chocolate with extra marshmallows for Harper. "What brings you to Denver, besides a general need for altitude adjustment?" The question was light, but his eyes were careful, like he recognized something in her he knew better than to push too hard. Daria wrapped her hands around her warm mug, watching the foam patterns slowly dissolve. "I needed somewhere new," she said finally. "Somewhere I could remember who I am without anyone else's expectations getting in the way." Harper looked up from her sugar packet city. "That's what Daddy said too. He said Denver is our fresh paper for drawing a new picture." Silas reached over and gently wiped chocolate from his daughter's chin. Harper has a way of making everything sound simpler than it is. Sometimes simple is better, Daria found herself saying. Sometimes we make things complicated because we're afraid of how easy the truth really is. The words hung between them as Harper continued building her sugar packet metropolis, now complete with a marshmallow moon. Outside, the snow fell steadily, erasing the old paths and laying down fresh ones. "Would you like to see my new room when it has furniture?" Harper asked suddenly. "Aunt Daddy says we can paint it any color I want, and I'm thinking either rainbow or sunset or maybe both." "Harper," Silas started, but Daria cut in. "I'd like that," she said, surprising herself with how much she meant it. "But only if you help me bake something first. I happen to be a pretty good baker." The girl's eyes lit up. "Really? Like cakes and cookies and everything?" "And everything," Daria confirmed, feeling something warm unfurl in her chest at Harper's excitement. "Dad, can we, please?" Silas looked between them, his daughter's hopeful face and Daria's slightly nervous one. "Well," he said slowly, "we do need to test out the new kitchen at some point." Outside, Denver continued its slow transformation under the spring snow. Inside, over cooling coffee and half-eaten pastries, three people who had started the day as strangers found themselves making plans that felt surprisingly like hope. The Turners' new house sat on a quiet street in the Grove district, a modest, two-story craftsman with faded blue siding and a wraparound porch that had seen better days. As Daria followed their car in her Uber the next morning, grocery bags full of baking supplies beside her, she wondered if she was making a mistake, but Harper's face appearing in the window, breath fogging the glass as she waved enthusiastically, made something in her chest settle. "You came!" Harper burst through the front door, nearly slipping on the snow-dusted steps in her sock feet. "Harper, Elise!" Silas called from inside. "Shoes!" Daria climbed the porch steps, taking in the wind chimes hanging from weathered hooks and the empty flower pots waiting for spring. Through the open door, she could see moving boxes stacked in the living room, their contents spilling out like intimate glimpses into the Turners' life, photo frames wrapped in bubble wrap, well-loved books, a child's stuffed rabbit missing one ear. "Here, let me help with those." Silas appeared, taking some of her grocery bags. He'd changed into a faded navy Henley that made his eyes look more grey than blue, a smudge of dust on his cheeks suggesting he'd been unpacking. The kitchen was a mix of vintage charm and modern updates, original hardwood floors and built-in cabinets, painted a soft whitey, but with new stainless steel appliances that gleamed under the morning light streaming through the windows. "The previous owners just renovated," Silas explained, setting the bags on the granite countertop. "It's a lucky break for us, since I'm better at fixing things than building them from scratch." "Daddy can fix anything," Harper declared, now properly shod in purple unicorn slippers. "Except hearts. He says those have to fix themselves." An awkward silence followed her words. Silas busied himself with unpacking a box labeled "Kitchen Essential" in careful block letters, while Daria began arranging her baking supplies with perhaps more attention than necessary. "So," she said finally, pulling out flour and sugar, "who's ready to learn how to make my special double chocolate chip cookies?" Harper's hand shot up so fast she nearly knocked over a stack of plates. "Me! Can we make them look like snowflakes since it's snowing?" Outside, fat flakes continued to fall, adding to the 3 inches that had accumulated overnight. Denver's spring snow, Daria was learning, was as unpredictable as the path that had led her here. "It's our first rule of baking," Daria said, pulling her hair back into a neat bun, "is mise en place. That means—" "Everything in its place," Silas interrupted softly. When she looked at him questioningly, he shrugged. "I watch a lot of cooking shows with Harper. They help her fall asleep." For the next hour, the kitchen transformed into a workshop of measured chaos. Harper proved to be an enthusiastic if messy assistant, her face streaked with flour as she helped measure ingredients. Silas worked around them, unpacking dishes and organizing cabinets, but Daria caught him watching them more than once, with an expression that made her hands tremble slightly as she demonstrated the proper way to cream butter and sugar. "The secret," she told Harper, who stood on a chair to reach the counter, "is to really let the butter and sugar get to know each other. They have to dance together until they're fluffy and light. Like how you and Daddy danced with your eyes on the airplane." Daria nearly dropped the mixer. Silas's unpacking sounds behind them suddenly stopped. "I think," Daria recovered, her voice only slightly uneven, "that butter and sugar are much better dancers than I am." "I doubt that," Silas said quietly. and when Daria glanced back, he was studying a coffee mug with intense concentration. As they worked, Daria found herself sharing bits of her baking knowledge, accumulated from years of watching her grandmother in the kitchen. Now baking is science and love mixed together, she explained as they added the dry ingredients. Too much of either, and the whole thing falls apart. Is that why you want to open your own bakery? Harper asked, tongue sticking out as she carefully stirred the chocolate chips into the dough. Daria froze. She hadn't mentioned that dream to anyone in years, not even her ex. How did you... You look at the dough like Daddy looks at broken things, Harper said matter-of-factly, like you know exactly how to make it better. Something clattered behind them, Silas dropping a spatula into a drawer too forcefully. When Daria turned, he was looking at his daughter with a mixture of pride and something that might have been fear. Sorry, he said, though it wasn't clear what he was apologizing for. Harper has a way of seeing things most people miss. The oven timer beeped, saving Daria from having to respond. The first batch of cookies emerged golden and perfect, their centers slightly soft in the way that promised chewy perfection when cooled. They look like little suns, Harper exclaimed, hopping from foot to foot as she waited for permission to taste one. 5 minutes to cool, Daria instructed, sliding the next tray into the oven. Unless you want to burn your tongue, Daddy always says waiting is the hardest part of wanting something, Harper said sagely, though her eyes never left the cookies. Your daddy seems very wise, Daria replied, aware of Silas's presence behind her, closer now than he had been before. Not wise, he said softly, just familiar with waiting. The moment stretched between them, full of unspoken things. Then Harper sneezed, sending a cloud of flour into the air, and the tension broke into laughter. They spent the afternoon baking batch after batch, trying different variations, some with nuts, some without. One batch with mint chips that Harper declared tastes like toothpaste but in a good way. Outside, the snow continued to fall, creating a quiet bubble around the house that made it feel like they were the only people awake in the world. As the light began to fade, Daria started packing up her supplies. Harper had fallen asleep on the couch, a half-eaten cookie still clutched in her hand, chocolate smeared on her chin. Thank you, Silas said, as he helped Daria clean up. Not just for the cookies, for making this feel like home, Daria suggested when he trailed off. Yeah, he ran a hand through his hair, leaving it slightly disheveled. I wasn't sure we'd find that here. I should go, Daria said, though everything in her wanted to stay in this warm kitchen with its cookie-scented air and its way of making her feel like she belonged. It's getting late, Silas nodded, but made no move to step away from where they stood, close enough that she could smell the faint scent of cedar and coffee that seemed to cling to him. Harper has school tours tomorrow, he said finally. But maybe after... Maybe, Daria agreed, surprising herself. She'd come to Denver to be alone, to find herself. Instead, she'd spent her first full day baking cookies with a 6-year-old philosopher and her father who fixed everything except hearts. At the door, Silas handed her a container of cookies. Harper insisted you take some. She says they'll help you feel less lonely in your hotel. Daria accepted the container, their fingers brushing. She's very perceptive, your daughter. Too perceptive sometimes. He smiled, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. Be careful driving back. The snow's picking up again. As her Uber pulled away from the curb, Daria watched the house grow smaller in the rear window. The porch light cast a warm glow through the falling snow, and she could see Silas still standing in the doorway, a dark silhouette against the light. In her lap, the container of cookies was still warm, like a piece of the afternoon's magic she could carry with her. On its lid, she noticed Harper had stuck a post-it note with a drawing, 3 smiling figures standing in what looked like snow, surrounded by hearts and what might have been cookies with wings. Daria traced the childish drawing with her finger, remembering Harper's words about waiting being the hardest part of wanting something. She was beginning to understand exactly what that meant. 3 days after the cookie-baking afternoon, Daria sat cross-legged on her hotel room bed, surrounded by job applications and half-formed business plans. Her laptop screen glowed with an email from a local real estate agent listing available retail spaces in the Grove district. The prices made her stomach clench, but she forced herself to keep scrolling. Her phone buzzed with a text from Silas. Harper asked if you'd like to come to dinner tonight. No pressure. She's making her famous mac and cheese. Famous because it's the only thing she can cook. Daria stared at the message, her thumb hovering over the reply button. They'd exchanged numbers that snowy afternoon, but this was the first time he'd reached out. Before she could respond, another text appeared. She's also convinced the house feels lonely without you. Her words, not mine, though I can't say she's wrong. Heat crept up Daria's neck. She was about to reply when a third message came through. Sorry, that was probably too much. Ignore me. Something about his awkward backtracking made her smile. She typed back, mac and cheese sounds perfect. What time? The response was immediate. 6:30? I promise to have actual vegetables too. She arrived at the Blue Craftsman house precisely at 6:28, clutching a paper bag containing a fresh batch of chocolate chip cookies she'd made in the hotel's kitchenette. The porch light was already on, casting a warm glow across the snow that still lingered in patches on the lawn. Harper threw open the door before Daria could knock. You came. Daddy, she came. She wore a child-sized apron decorated with cartoon cats and had a streak of cheese powder across one cheek. Indoor voice. Butterfly, Silas called from the kitchen. The smell of garlic and something herbal wafted through the house. The living room had transformed since Daria's last visit. Moving boxes had been replaced by carefully arranged furniture, a well-worn leather couch, bookshelves filled with an eclectic mix of children's books and technical manuals, and framed photographs that caught Daria's eye. She paused at one showing a younger Silas with a woman who had Harper's delicate features and blonde curls. They were laughing at something off camera, his arm around her waist, her hand resting over her clearly pregnant belly. That's my mom, Harper said quietly, coming to stand beside Daria. She was pretty, wasn't she? Beautiful, Daria agreed, her throat tight. Just like you. She died when I was a baby, Harper continued matter-of-factly. Daddy doesn't like to talk about it, but sometimes he takes out her pictures at night when he thinks I'm sleeping. Before Daria could respond, Silas appeared in the doorway. Their dinner's ready if you're... He stopped, seeing them by the photo. Something shuttered in his expression. I brought cookies, Daria said quickly, holding up the bag. After dinner? Silas managed a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. Come on, Chef Harper. Show Daria your culinary masterpiece. The kitchen table had been set with mismatched plates and a mason jar filled with fresh wildflowers. Beside each plate sat a carefully folded paper crane. Harper's been learning origami, Silas explained as they sat. YouTube tutorials. The blue one is yours, Harper told Daria. Blue means truth in crane language. I'm pretty sure you made that up, Silas said fondly. All languages were made up by somebody, Harper replied with 6-year-old logic. I'm just somebody too. Dinner was surprisingly good. The mac and cheese elevated by roasted broccoli and a side salad that Silas had prepared. Conversation flowed easily, Harper dominating with stories about her new school and the friends she'd made during her trial day. And Lily has 2 moms, she was saying, and they both came to pick her up, and they both gave her hugs, and I thought maybe... She stopped abruptly, looking at her father. An uncomfortable silence fell over the table. Silas became very interested in his salad. Who wants to help me with dishes? Daria asked, standing perhaps too quickly. I'll wash. You dry. Harper bounced up, eager for the distraction. As they worked side by side at the sink, the little girl grew unusually quiet. Penny for your thoughts, Daria prompted gently. Harper was quiet for another moment, carefully drying a fork. Do you believe in magic? What kind of magic? The kind that fixes broken things, not like how Daddy fixes toasters and phones, but like... She struggled for the words. Unlike how sometimes when you smile at him, he looks less tired. Daria nearly dropped the plate she was washing. Harper. It's okay if you don't, Harper rushed on. But I think maybe that's why you found us on the airplane, because Daddy needed someone to help him remember how to be happy, and I needed... She trailed off, lower lip trembling slightly. What did you need, sweet girl? Daria asked softly. Someone who makes cookies and doesn't mind my questions, and looks at me like I'm magic too. The words hit Daria like a physical force, bringing back memories of her own loss, the baby she'd never told anyone about, the dreams that had died before they could take shape. She set down the dish she was holding, soap suds dripping onto the counter. Harper, she said carefully, sometimes grown-ups are complicated. We carry lots of different feelings all at once, and... Is that why you're scared? Harper interrupted. Because Daddy's scared too. I can tell. He keeps looking at you like he wants to say something, but then remembers he's supposed to be sad forever. Who's supposed to be sad forever? Silas's voice came from the doorway, making them both jump. Harper dropped her dish towel. I have to go. Feed my stuffed animals. She darted past her father and up the stairs, leaving Daria and Silas alone in the suddenly too small kitchen. I'm sorry. they both said at once. Silas ran a hand through his hair. Harper sometimes. She's observant. They stopped, awkward laughs filling the space between them. She misses her mother, Silas said finally, even though she never knew her, or maybe because she never knew her, and sometimes I think she's looking for, I don't know, pieces of what she lost. And what about you? Daria asked before she could stop herself. What are you looking for? He met her eyes then, and the raw honesty there made her breath catch. I wasn't looking for anything. That's what scares me. The confession hung in the air between them, heavy with implication. From upstairs came the sound of Harper singing to her stuffed animals, her clear voice carrying down the stairs. You are my sunshine, my only sunshine. I should go, Daria said, though everything in her wanted to stay, to step closer, to see what would happen if she let herself fall into the gravity of this man and his perceptive daughter. Yeah, Silas agreed, but neither of them moved. The song drifted down again. Please don't take my sunshine away. Daria, Silas started, taking a step forward. She held up a hand. Don't, please. I came to Denver to find myself, not to... Maybe finding yourself doesn't have to mean being by yourself. The words were soft, almost a whisper, but they echoed in her chest like thunder. She thought of the baby she'd lost, of the dreams she'd buried, of all the ways she'd learned to be careful with her heart. Good night, Silas, she said, and fled before he could see the tears threatening to fall. As she drove back to her hotel, the paper crane Harper had made sat on the passenger seat beside her. Blue for truth, the girl had said. Daria wondered what truth she was running from, and which ones she was running toward. Behind her, the Craftsman house grew smaller in her rearview mirror, its warm lights glowing like a beacon in the Denver night. Or maybe, she thought, like a warning. A week passed, then two. Daria threw herself into job hunting, spending her days touring potential bakery locations and her nights researching small business loans. She ignored Silas's occasional texts. Simple things like, Harper made another crane for you, or the cookies are all gone, and she says, store-bought aren't the same. Each message felt like a small stone, dropping into the still waters of her carefully constructed solitude. The wooden spoon became her unofficial office, its brick walls and mismatched furniture, offering comfort she couldn't find in her sterile hotel room. She was there, laptop open and untouched coffee growing cold, when the bell above the door chimed. Daria! She looked up to find Harper running toward her, pink backpack bouncing, Silas following with an apologetic expression. Sorry, he said, reaching their table. I didn't know you'd be here. Harper saw you through the window and... I made you something, Harper interrupted, already digging through her backpack. She pulled out a slightly crumpled piece of paper covered in careful crayon drawings. It's your bakery, see? I made the windows big because you like sunlight, and there's a special corner for reading books. And these are all the people who will come because your cookies make them happy. Daria's throat tightened as she studied the drawing. Harper had filled the imaginary bakery with a rainbow of diverse faces, all sporting exaggerated smiles. In one corner, she recognized three familiar figures: a tall man in flannel, a small girl with yellow curls, and a woman with copper-tinted spirals for hair. Harper, Silas warned softly, but Daria shook her head. It's beautiful, she said, tracing the careful lines with her fingertip. Thank you. Can we stay? Harper asked, already climbing into the chair next to Daria. I have homework, but I promise to be quiet. Well, mostly quiet. Well, I'll try. Silas started to object, but Daria found herself saying, Of course you can stay. He studied her for a moment before nodding. I'll get our drinks. Hot chocolate for the artist? With extra marshmallows, Harper called after him. Then, turning to Daria with serious eyes, Are you mad at us? What? No, of course not. Then how come you stopped coming over? Daddy says sometimes people need space, but I think sometimes space is just another word for being scared. Before Daria could respond, Silas returned with their drinks. He'd remembered how she took her coffee. Almond milk, 1 sugar. The realization made her chest ache. They settled into an unexpectedly comfortable routine. Harper worked on her math homework, occasionally asking Daria to check her answers. Silas pulled out a worn notebook filled with what looked like circuit diagrams, and Daria tried to focus on her business plan instead of the way Silas's presence made the busy coffee shop feel somehow smaller and larger at the same time. What's EBITDA? Harper asked, peering at Daria's laptop screen. It's a way to measure how much money a business makes, Daria explained. So before things like taxes and... Is that why you're worried? Because of money. Harper, Silas interjected. Remember what we said about personal questions? But Daria found herself answering. Partly. Starting a business is expensive and scary, and sometimes when things are both expensive and scary, we talk ourselves out of them before we even try. Like how Daddy talks himself out of being happy. Harper Elise Turner. Silas's voice was sharper than Daria had ever heard it. That's enough. The girl's lower lip trembled. I'm sorry, I don't want Daria to disappear like Mommy did. The words fell like bombs in the quiet coffee shop. Silas went completely still, his face draining of color. Daria felt the familiar panic rising in her chest, the same panic she'd felt in the hospital 18 months ago, when they'd told her there was no heartbeat. I need some air, she managed, grabbing her coat and nearly running for the door. Outside, the April afternoon had turned cool, threatening rain. Daria leaned against the brick wall, trying to remember how to breathe. She heard the door open behind her, but didn't turn around. She didn't mean... Silas started. I lost a baby. The words tumbled out before she could stop them. 18 months ago, I was 5 months pregnant, and then I wasn't. I never told anyone. Not even... She wrapped her arms around herself. Not even the father. He was already pulling away, talking about how I was too emotional, too much. So I carried it alone. The loss, the grief, everything. Silence stretched between them, broken only by distant traffic and the muffled sounds of the coffee shop behind them. Madeline died 3 hours after Harper was born, Silas said finally. Complications. 1 minute I was a husband and a father, and the next I was just a father, and some days I'm not even sure I'm doing that right. Daria turned to face him then. He was looking at the ground, hands shoved in his pockets, shoulders curved as if bearing an invisible weight. You're doing it beautifully, she whispered. He looked up, his eyes meeting hers. So are you. What? Living? Healing? Building something new? You're doing it beautifully, even if you can't see it yet. A drop of rain hit Daria's cheek, or maybe it was a tear. She couldn't tell anymore. I'm terrified, she admitted. Of what? Of everything. Of failing, of succeeding, of letting myself want things again, of... She gestured between them. Of this. Silas took a step closer. Me too. But maybe. He reached out slowly, telegraphing his movement, and brushed away what was definitely a tear from her cheek. Maybe being terrified together is better than being terrified alone. The door opened again, and Harper poked her head out. I'm really sorry, she said in a small voice. Please don't leave again. Daria looked at this little family, the grieving father trying so hard to be enough, the perceptive daughter carrying wisdom beyond her years, and felt something in her chest crack open. I'm not leaving, she said, surprising herself with how much she meant it. But Harper? Yes? Your daddy's right about personal questions, and sometimes grown-ups need time to figure things out. Can you understand that? Harper nodded solemnly. Like how cookies need time to cool before you can eat them. A laugh bubbled up in Daria's throat, unexpected and real. Exactly like that. Then can we go home and make some? I think we all need cookies right now. Silas and Daria's eyes met over Harper's head. Home. Such a simple word for such a complicated feeling. Yeah, Silas said softly, still holding Daria's gaze. So I think we could all use some home right now. As they walked to their cars, the threatened rain finally began to fall, a gentle spring shower that promised new growth, if only they were brave enough to let it take root. The kitchen counter in Daria's hotel room was covered with papers, loan applications, business permits, health department regulations, but for once, she wasn't looking at them. Instead, she was staring at her phone, reading Silas's latest text. Harper has a school presentation tomorrow. She asked if you'd come 2 p.m. at Denver Prep. No pressure. But she's telling the class about her future bakery consultant. So, 3 days had passed since their revelations outside Wooden Spoon. 3 days of careful texts and shared silences that felt more intimate than words. 3 days of trying to convince herself that running away would be easier than staying. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard before typing, I'll be there. The next day, she found herself walking through the polished halls of Denver Preparatory Academy, following signs to the first-grade classroom. The walls were lined with artwork and science projects, the air carrying that distinct mix of crayons and disinfectant that seemed universal to all schools. Silas was already there, looking slightly out of place in his work clothes, dark jeans and a grey button-down with the sleeves rolled up. He'd clearly come straight from fixing something at Wooden Spoon, a smudge of coffee grounds still visible on his collar. "You came," he said softly as she slipped into the seat beside him. "Of course I came." Harper stood at the front of the classroom, wearing a dress Daria recognized from their shopping trip 2 days ago, a purple twirl dress that the girl had declared perfect for important business presentations. Her blonde curls were pulled back with a matching ribbon, and she clutched a stack of papers that looked suspiciously like the drawings from Wooden Spoon. "For my presentation about community helpers," Harper began with practiced clarity, "I want to talk about my friend Daria. She's going to open the best bakery in Denver, and she lets me help test all the recipes, which Daddy says is very important market research." A few parents chuckled. Silas's hand found Daria's in the darkness of the back row, squeezing gently. "But she doesn't just make cookies," Harper continued earnestly. "She makes people feel like they belong. Like how when we first moved here and everything was new and scary, she made our house smell like home, and how she always listens to my questions, even the hard ones." Daria felt tears pricking at her eyes. Silas's thumb traced small circles on her palm. "My mum died when I was a baby," Harper said matter-of-factly, and Daria felt Silas tense beside her. "And sometimes I think that made Daddy afraid to let people be close to us. But Daria teaches us that sometimes the best recipes need different ingredients to make something special." The teacher stepped forward, perhaps sensing the heavy turn in what was supposed to be a simple presentation, but Harper wasn't finished. "So community helpers aren't just police officers and firefighters. Sometimes they're people who show up when you're lonely and scared, and they bring cookies, and they make your daddy smile again, and they help you believe in magic even when grown-ups say magic isn't real." She held up her final drawing, the one of the bakery with the 3 figures in the corner. "This is what love looks like," she declared. "It looks like making room for new people in your heart, even when you're scared. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk." The classroom erupted in applause and laughter at her serious use of the adult phrase. Daria tried to discreetly wipe her eyes with her free hand, unwilling to let go of Silas's grip with the other. After the presentations, as other parents and children mingled over juice boxes and apple slices, Harper bounded over to them. "Did I do good? So I practiced with my stuffed animals all night." "You did amazing, Butterfly." Silas knelt to hug her, his voice rough with emotion. "Was it okay that I talked about Mom?" She whispered against his shoulder. "I know you don't like to—" "It was perfect," he assured her. "You're perfect." Harper pulled back, turning to Daria with uncertain eyes. "Was it okay that I called you my friend? Because I know grown-ups sometimes need time to figure things out, like cookies cooling, but I thought—" Daria dropped to her knees, pulling Harper into a fierce hug. "It was more than okay," she whispered into those blonde curls that smelled of strawberry shampoo and childhood dreams. Later, as they walked to their cars under the warm afternoon sun, Harper skipping ahead to chase a butterfly, Silas cleared his throat. "I got approved for a small business loan," he said casually, "for expanding the repair business. There's this space in the Grove district next to Wooden Spoon. It's probably too big for just my shop, but—" He glanced at her sideways. "It has a commercial kitchen in the back. Previous tenant was a catering company." Daria stopped walking. "Silas, I'm not proposing anything crazy," he said quickly. "Just partnership, business partnership, for now. The rent would be split. The space would be shared. You could start small, build your dream one cookie at a time. And if it doesn't work out, if we don't work out," he turned to face her fully, "then we figure it out, like adults, like people who respect each other enough to try something scary together." "Is that what we're doing? Trying something scary together?" A soft smile played at the corners of his mouth. "See, I think we've been doing that since you sat next to us on that flight." Harper's voice floated back to them. "Look, a rainbow. Daddy says rainbows are promises that good things come after storms." They both looked up. Sure enough, a faint rainbow arched across the Denver sky, its colors barely visible against the blue. "What do you say?" Silas asked quietly. "So I want to chase a rainbow with us." Daria thought about the paperwork covering her hotel counter, about the dreams she'd been too afraid to voice, about the way Harper's small hand felt in hers, and the way Silas looked at her like she was already home. "Yes," she said simply. "Yes to all of it." Harper ran back to them, breathless and beaming. "Can we go get ice cream to celebrate Daria saying yes?" "How did you know she'd say yes?" Silas asked, amused. "Because," Harper said with the infinite wisdom of childhood, "sometimes people just belong in your story, even if they come in on chapter 4. Daria laughed, the sound carrying across the parking lot like music. "Ice cream sounds perfect, but only if we can talk about what colors to paint the bakery. Rainbow, Harper shouted, like today's promise. As they walked to their cars, Daria felt something settle in her chest. Not the absence of fear, but the presence of courage. Sometimes, she realized, healing doesn't look like grand gestures or dramatic moments. Sometimes it looks like a first-grade presentation, a shared business dream, and a little girl who believes in magic enough for all of them. The storefront next to Wooden Spoon had good bones, as Silas put it. High ceilings with exposed wooden beams, original brick walls, and windows that filled the space with natural light. But standing in the empty room, surrounded by dust motes dancing in the morning sun, Daria felt the weight of possibility pressing against her chest. "The health inspector's coming next week," she said, more to herself than to Silas, who was measuring the back wall. "Oh, and the contractor says the kitchen needs at least 8,000 in upgrades to meet code, and the loan officer still hasn't—" "Breathe," Silas interrupted gently, setting down his tape measure. "One thing at a time." She turned to face him, arms wrapped around herself. "What if I'm not ready for this?" "Ready for what?" "Following your dream, creating something beautiful." He crossed the room to stand before her. "Or letting people help you do it." Before she could answer, the bell above the door chimed. Harper burst in, followed by Mabel from Wooden Spoon, who'd been watching her while they worked. "Look what I made." Harper held up a piece of paper covered in what looked like floor plans. If floor plans were drawn in crayon and included a unicorn testing station in the corner. "Sorry," Mabel smiled. She insisted on bringing over her design contributions. "The tables should go here," Harper explained, spreading her drawing on the dusty floor, "so people can see the street but also talk to each other. And we need lots of plants because Daddy says plants make people feel peaceful, and peaceful people eat more cookies." "Is that your professional opinion?" Daria asked, feeling her anxiety ease as she knelt beside the girl. "Yep. And we should paint this wall with chalkboard paint so kids can draw while their parents drink coffee. And maybe," she hesitated, looking up at Silas, "maybe we could put Mom's old recipe box on a shelf, the special one with the flowers, so she can be part of the new story too." The silence that followed was heavy with meaning. Daria held her breath, watching Silas's face as he processed his daughter's request. "I think," he said finally, his voice rough, "that would be perfect if—" he glanced at Daria. "If everyone agrees." "I'd be honored," Daria said softly. Mabel cleared her throat. "Well, on that note, I brought something else." She pulled a folder from her bag. "My grandfather's original recipes from when Wooden Spoon first opened, including his famous cinnamon rolls that people still ask about. I thought maybe it's time they came back to life." Daria accepted the folder with trembling hands. "Mabel, I can't—" "Yes, you can," the purple-haired barista said firmly, "because that's what community means. We pass things down, we share what matters, we help each other's dreams grow. Like how Daddy's fixing things will help pay for the fancy ovens," Harper asked innocently. "Harper," Silas warned, but Daria caught his arm. "No, she's right. We should be honest about this." She turned to face him fully. "You're investing too much, the loan, the repairs, the shared rent." "I'm investing in us," he said simply, "in all of us." The words hung in the dusty air, weighted with promise and possibility. "Speaking of investing," Mabel interjected with a knowing smile, "the morning crowd's been asking when they can start pre-ordering wedding cakes. Apparently, someone's been sharing your test recipes with very appreciative customers." Daria shot a look at Silas, who raised his hands in mock surrender. "Don't look at me. Your biggest fan here," he nodded toward Harper, "has been quite the marketing department." "They were sad," Harper defended, "and Daria's lemon cake makes people happy. I was just being a community helper." The laughter that followed broke the last of the tension. As Mabel headed back to her shop, promising to return with coffee, Daria found herself really looking at the space, not with fear, but with vision. "What if we put the display cases here?" she mused, walking toward the front windows, "and maybe a reading nook in that corner, with comfortable chairs and twinkle lights," Harper added. "Every magical place needs twinkle lights." "Speaking of magic," Silas said, pulling something from his back pocket, "so I got approved for the building permit this morning. We can start renovations next week." Daria stared at the official document, her vision blurring slightly. "This is really happening, isn't it?" "Only if you want it to," he said quietly. "We can still—" She cut him off by reaching for his hand. "I want it to. I want all of it." "Harper," who had been unusually quiet, suddenly spoke up. "Does that mean you'll stay forever?" "Because I drew another picture of our family, and I didn't leave any empty spaces this time." The question stopped both adults short. They looked at each other over Harper's head, 1,000 unspoken words passing between them. "I think," Daria said carefully, "that forever is a big word, but I'm not going anywhere. And maybe," she squeezed Silas's hand, "maybe forever is something we build one day at a time, like this place, with lots of taste testing," Harper added seriously, "because that's very important for quality control." "Absolutely," Silas agreed, pulling his daughter close with his free arm. "Can't build forever without proper quality control." Standing there in the dusty sunlight, hands linked and hearts full, Daria thought about all the ways love could look. Sometimes it looked like a business permit and shared dreams. Sometimes it looked like old recipe boxes and new beginnings. And sometimes it looked like a little girl drawing family pictures without empty spaces, believing hard enough for all of them that magic was real and forever was possible. "Okay," she said, squeezing both their hands. "Let's build something beautiful." And in the warm spring light, surrounded by possibilities and promises, they began to do just that. One blueprint, one recipe, one dream at a time. The recipe box sat unopened on Silas's kitchen counter, its floral pattern faded with age, its corners worn smooth from years of loving use. Daria stood before it, fingers hovering over the lid, feeling like an intruder in someone else's memories. "You don't have to do this now," Silas said softly from behind her. It was late, Harper had been in bed for hours, and the house was quiet except for the gentle hum of the dishwasher. "I know." Daria drew her hand back. "But if we're going to include her recipes in the bakery's opening menu, I need to—" She trailed off, unable to find the right words. Silas stepped closer, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from him. "I haven't opened it either. Not since—" He stopped, cleared his throat. "Not since before Harper was born. Maddie was organizing her recipes, planning to teach me how to make her grandmother's bread. She said every father should know how to make bread for their child." The pain in his voice made Daria's chest ache. She turned to face him, finding his eyes in the dim kitchen light. "Tell me about her, about Madeline." For a moment, she thought he would refuse. Then he reached past her and lifted the recipe box with careful hands. "She color-coded everything," he said, a small smile playing at his lips as he opened the lid. "Blue tabs for breads, yellow for cookies, pink for special occasions." He pulled out a card covered in neat handwriting. "She was organized in a way I never could be," said it was the elementary school teacher in her. Daria watched as he traced the handwritten instructions with his finger. "Tell what was her favorite thing to bake?" "Cinnamon rolls." His smile grew warmer. "But not the regular kind. She'd add orange zest to the dough and cardamom to the filling. Said normal was boring." He looked up, meeting Daria's eyes. "She would have liked you, you know. Your creativity, your kindness with Harper." The words hung between them, heavy with meaning. Daria felt tears pricking at her eyes. "I'm not trying to replace her," she whispered. "Size, I would never—" "I know," he cut her off gently. "That's one of the reasons this feels right. You're not trying to fill her space. You're creating your own." A floorboard creaked above them, followed by the soft pad of small feet on stairs. Harper appeared in the doorway, rubbing her eyes. "I had a dream about Mommy," she said quietly. "She was in the bakery, showing me how to make heart-shaped cookies." Silas's breath caught. Daria moved instinctively toward Harper, but stopped herself, suddenly unsure of her place in this moment. Harper solved the dilemma by walking over and wrapping her arms around both their legs, creating a small circle in the midnight kitchen. "In my dream," she continued, "Mommy said it was okay to be happy again. She said sometimes love is like a garden. You can plant new flowers without taking away the old ones." Daria felt Silas tremble slightly beside her. She reached for his hand, finding it already reaching for hers. "Your mum was very wise," she managed, her voice thick with unshed tears. "The wisest," Silas agreed, his grip on Daria's hand tightening. "Come on, Butterfly, let's get you back to bed." But Harper shook her head against their legs. "Can we make Mommy's cinnamon rolls first? The special ones with orange. I remember helping her, but I was really little and the memory's getting fuzzy." Daria looked at the clock, nearly midnight, then at Silas, seeing her own tears reflected in his eyes. "Sleep is important," she said gently. "So are memories," Silas replied softly. Then to Harper, "Go wash your hands, Butterfly. Baker's rules." What followed was a midnight lesson in love and legacy, flour dusting their pajamas as they worked. Daria read Madeline's recipe cards aloud, while Silas translated his late wife's shorthand notes. Harper measured ingredients with solemn concentration, asking questions about the mother she barely remembered. Was this her favorite bowl? Did she sing while she baked like Daria does? Did she let you lick the spoon, Daddy? Each question was a small stone dropped into the still waters of their shared grief, ripples spreading outward, touching them all. As the first batch of orange-scented rolls baked, filling the kitchen with warmth and memory, Harper fell asleep at the table, her head pillowed on her arms. Silas carried her to the couch instead of upstairs, covering her with the soft blanket that always smelled faintly of vanilla. When he returned to the kitchen, he found Daria crying silently as she washed dishes. "Hey," he said softly, turning her to face him. "Doris, what's wrong?" "I keep thinking about my baby," she whispered, "about all the memories we never got to make, the recipes I never got to share." She gestured to the recipe box. "The legacy that will never be." Silas pulled her close, and for the first time she let herself collapse into his embrace, her tears soaking his flour-dusted shirt. "Your baby is part of your story," he murmured into her hair, "part of what brought you here, to us. And maybe," he pulled back slightly, wiping her tears with gentle fingers, "maybe Harper's right. Maybe love is like a garden. We can honor what we've lost while still planting new seeds." The timer dinged softly, and the scent of cinnamon and orange wrapped around them like a warm embrace. On the couch, Harper stirred slightly, murmuring in her sleep. "I'm scared," Daria admitted against Silas's chest, "of losing this." "Of losing you both." "I know," he said simply. "Me too. But maybe that's okay. Maybe being scared together is better than being safe apart." In the soft kitchen light, surrounded by the scent of memories both old and new, they held each other. And somewhere between the midnight hours and early dawn, as cinnamon rolls cooled on wire racks and a little girl dreamed of gardens and mothers and love that grows instead of fades, they found a moment of perfect peace, not because their fears had vanished, but because they'd chosen to face them together. When Harper woke at sunrise, she found them asleep on the kitchen floor, backs against the cabinets, hands intertwined, and a plate of her mother's orange-scented cinnamon rolls waiting on the counter. Without waking them, she carefully placed her latest drawing beside the plate, a garden full of flowers, some old, some new, all blooming together under a sun that looked suspiciously like a heart. The night before the bakery's grand opening, storm clouds gathered over Denver. Daria stood at the shop's window, watching lightning flicker in the distance. Behind her, the space she and Silas had poured their hearts into over the past month waited in pristine readiness. Display cases gleaming, chairs arranged just so, Harper's artwork framed on the freshly painted walls. But it wasn't the storm that had her standing vigil at midnight. It was the date. 1 year and 6 months to the day since she'd lost her baby. Her phone buzzed with a text from Silas. "Can't sleep either." Before she could reply, the shop's door opened. She turned to find him there, rain-dampened and worried, holding an umbrella. "Harper's at my sister's," he said softly. I remembered what day it is." The fact that he'd remembered, that he'd marked this date in his heart alongside his own grief, made something break inside her. "I never even got to hold them," she whispered, the words she'd kept inside for so long finally spilling out. "They just took them away, said it was better that way. Clean, clinical, like losing a baby is something that can be cleaned up and filed away." Silas crossed the room in 3 long strides, gathering her into his arms as the first sob broke free. "I had a name picked out," she continued against his chest. "Sage. Because they were going to be my wisdom, my new beginning. And now," she pulled back, gesturing to the bakery around them, "now I'm standing in a different new beginning, and I feel like I'm betraying them by being happy." Thunder rolled overhead as Silas cupped her face in his hands. "Listen to me," he said fiercely. "Being happy doesn't dishonor grief. Living fully doesn't mean loving less. I learned that from Harper, from watching her love Madeline with her whole heart while still having room to love you. But what if," Daria's voice caught, "what if I'm not strong enough for this? For the bakery, for you, for Harper? What if I break again? Then we'll be broken together." His thumbs wiped away her tears. "And we'll rebuild, like we rebuilt this place. Like we're rebuilding ourselves." Lightning flashed, illuminating the small shelf above the register, where Madeline's recipe box sat beside a framed ultrasound photo, Daria's last image of the baby she'd lost, finally brought into the light after 18 months of hiding. "I want to do something," she said suddenly, "before tomorrow's opening. Something to honor them both. Madeline and—" Her hand pressed against her stomach, where phantom kicks sometimes still woke her at night. "And Sage." Silas's eyes softened with understanding. "What do you have in mind?" An hour later, they stood in the pouring rain in the small garden behind the bakery. Harper's carefully planted flowers bent under the weight of the storm, but didn't break. Daria held 2 paper lanterns, one pink, one blue. In careful handwriting, she'd written up Madeline on one and Sagen on the other. Beside her, Silas held a lighter, shielding it from the rain. "I used to think healing meant forgetting," she said over the sound of the storm. "But it's not about forgetting, is it? It's about making room, like Harper said, planting new flowers without uprooting the old ones." "It's about choosing life," Silas agreed softly. "Every day, every moment, even when it hurts. Even when we're scared." Together they lit the lanterns. Despite the rain, the small flames caught, warming the paper from within. As they released them into the stormy sky, Daria whispered, "For Sage, who taught me that love doesn't end with loss." She squeezed Silas's hand. "And for Madeline, who loved so well that her light still guides us." They watched the lanterns rise, dancing in the wind, until they were just 2 points of light among the stars that had begun to peek through breaking clouds. "The storm's passing," Silas observed, pulling Daria closer as the rain gentled to a soft drizzle. "But we're still here," she replied, understanding flowing between them like electricity. His kiss, when it came, tasted of rain and promise, of ending storms and beginning days, of grief honored and joy permitted, of love that grows in broken places and blooms anyway. When they finally broke apart, the clouds had parted enough to reveal a sliver of moon. Its light caught on the bakery's new sign, Rise and Bloom Bakery, with Harper's drawing of intertwined flowers serving as the logo. "Ready for tomorrow?" Silas asked, his arms still around her. Daria looked at their reflection in the bakery window, rain-soaked and smiling, holding each other up. Behind them, she could almost imagine other reflections, a woman with Harper's curls, a tiny spirit with her own determined eyes, not haunting, but blessing, not weighing them down, but lifting them up. "Ready," she said firmly, for all of it. As they walked back to Silas's truck, planning to check on Harper at her aunt's house, Daria paused for one last look at the bakery. Tomorrow, it would be filled with customers and noise and life. But tonight, in the aftermath of the storm, it stood as a testament to what love could build from loss, a place where broken hearts could heal, where new dreams could take root alongside honored memories, where a little girl could draw family pictures without empty spaces. "You know what Harper would say right now?" Silas asked as he opened her door. "What?" "That every good story needs a little rain to make the flowers grow." Daria smiled, feeling the truth of it in her bones. Sometimes love looked like paper lanterns in a storm. Sometimes it looked like midnight baking and shared grief. And sometimes, if you were very lucky, it looked like this. 2 people choosing each other in the rain, building something beautiful from their broken pieces, and a little girl wise enough to know that the best gardens grow from both sunshine and storms. 1 year later, Daria stood in Terminal B of Atlanta International Airport, a small box of Rise and Bloom's signature orange cardamom cinnamon rolls balanced in her hands. Around her, travelers rushed past with their rolling suitcases and urgent conversations, but she remained still, anchored in the memory of another day in this same terminal. "Gate B23, Silas's voice came from behind her. "Some might call it fate." She turned to find him and Harper approaching, their matching grins warming her heart. Harper had grown taller in the past year, her blonde curls now reaching past her shoulders, but her eyes still held that same wise sparkle. "Look what I found." Harper held up a familiar-looking paper crane, slightly crushed but still recognizable. "It was under the seats. Do you think it's been here since last year?" "Different crane, same magic," Daria smiled, remembering the blue crane that had started their story. They settled into the same seats where they'd first met, sharing the cinnamon rolls as they waited for their flight back to Denver. Harper's legs swung back and forth as she told stories about their week visiting Daria's family in Atlanta. "And Grandma Rosa said she's going to teach me her secret pound cake recipe next time," Harper announced, licking frosting from her fingers. "But I told her Daria's already teaching me all the secrets. like how love is the most important ingredient. Silas reached over and wiped a smudge of cinnamon from his daughter's cheek. Speaking of secrets, he said, glancing at Daria with a slight smile, should we tell her? Daria's hand instinctively went to her stomach, where the smallest of bumps had just begun to show. I think it's time. Harper looked between them, her eyes widening. Tell me what? Well, Daria began, her voice soft with joy. Remember how you said every good story needs different ingredients to make something special? Harper nodded solemnly. Our family is getting a new ingredient. Daria took Silas's hand. A baby. The little girl's mouth formed a perfect O. Really? I'm going to be a big sister. Really? Silas confirmed. But this baby, they're going to need you to help them understand something very important about how families can hold both happiness and sadness, about how we can love people we've lost while loving people we've found. Harper's face grew serious. Because of Mommy in heaven. And baby Sage. Yes, Daria whispered, and because love grows, like your garden at home. Is that why we came back here? Harper asked, looking around the terminal. To tell the airport thank you for helping us find each other. Silas laughed softly. Something like that. Sometimes it's good to remember where your story began when you're starting a new chapter. Final boarding call for Flight 3492 to Denver. The announcement crackled overhead. The same flight number, Daria realized, as that first day. As they gathered their belongings, Harper tugged on Daria's sleeve. Can I tell you a secret? Of course. Last night, I had a dream about Mommy and baby Sage. They were in the bakery's garden, planting flowers. And Mommy said to tell you that some doors need to close so better ones can open, like how you have to let cookies cool before you can frost them. Tears pricked at Daria's eyes as she pulled Harper close. Over the girl's head, she met Silas's gaze, finding her own emotions reflected there. Your mum was right, she said. And you know what? I think this baby is very lucky to have such a wise big sister. And 2 moms watching over them, Harper added. One in heaven and one here. She patted Daria's stomach gently. Plus the best daddy who can fix anything except hearts. But that's okay because sometimes hearts fix themselves when you give them enough love. As they boarded the plane, Daria thought about circles and endings and beginnings. About how 1 year ago she'd sat in this terminal planning to run away, only to find herself running home instead. About how love could look like shared silence and midnight baking and a little girl's crayon drawings. They found their seats, the same row as before, though this time Harper insisted on taking the window seat so the baby can see the clouds. Okay? Silas asked softly as the plane began to taxi. Daria threaded her fingers through his, remembering another flight, another beginning. More than okay. Perfect. As the plane lifted into the Georgia sky, Harper pressed her face against the window, watching Atlanta grow smaller below them. Look, she exclaimed. A rainbow! Sure enough, a perfect arc of color stretched across the sky, a bridge between where they'd been and where they were going. You know what Daddy says about rainbows? Harper said, turning to them with shining eyes. They're promises that good things come after storms. And what do you say about them? Daria asked. I say they're like love, Harper replied. Beautiful and a little bit magic, and made up of lots of different colors, all working together to make something special. Silas squeezed Daria's hand. And what do you say? Daria looked at her family, the man who had taught her that broken hearts could love again, the girl who had shown her that wisdom sometimes came in crayon colors, and the tiny life growing inside her, a testament to second chances and healing grace. I say, she smiled, feeling the future unfold before them like pages in a storybook. I say sometimes the best stories start with a missed flight and cold coffee, and sometimes they start with a rainbow and a wise little girl who believes in magic. And cookies, Harper added seriously. Don't forget the cookies. As Denver beckoned in the distance, Daria closed her eyes and made a silent promise to all the loves they carried, past, present, and future. To Madeline, who had loved this family first, to Sage, who had opened her heart to new possibilities, to the baby growing beneath her heart, already so loved, and to herself, the woman who had learned that sometimes running away could lead you straight home. The story wasn't over. In many ways, it was just beginning. But as the plane chased the setting sun toward Denver, Daria knew one thing for certain. Whatever chapters came next, they would face them together, one recipe, one repair, one crayon drawing at a time. After all, as Harper always said, the best stories were the ones that kept growing, like gardens after rain, like love in healing hearts, like families built from choice and chance, and a little bit of airport magic. 5 years later, the early morning sun streamed through Rise and Bloom Bakery's windows, catching on the framed photographs that lined the walls, a visual timeline of love and growth. There was the grand opening shot, with Harper cutting the ribbon. The day they won Denver's Best New Bakery, Harper's 8th birthday celebration, with Daria teaching a kids' baking class, and the newest addition, a family portrait featuring a laughing 4-year-old boy with copper-colored curls and his mother's determined eyes. "Mama D!" Miles Turner's voice echoed through the empty bakery as he raced between tables, his father following with an apologetic smile. Can we make the special bread today?" Daria looked up from where she was arranging fresh pastries in the display case. "Madeline's orange bread." "Uh-huh. Harper says it's tradition for first days." "It is indeed," Silas confirmed, dropping a kiss on his wife's cheek. "Can't send our girl off to middle school without her grandmother's recipe." The kitchen door swung open as Harper emerged, now 11 and tall for her age, wearing an apron embroidered with Junior Master Baker and carrying a tray of still warm cinnamon rolls. "I already started the dough," she announced proudly, "and I remembered the cardamom this time." "Of course you did." Daria wrapped an arm around her daughter, because that's what Harper had been long before any legal documents made it official. "You're the keeper of all our important recipes." The morning light caught on the shelf above the register, where 2 photographs sat side by side, Madeline's smiling face and a small ultrasound image, both framed in silver. Below them, a child's drawing showed a garden full of flowers, some labeled for Mommy in Heaven and others for Baby Sage, with new blooms added each year as their family grew. "Look what I found in my old school stuff." Harper held up a faded paper crane, blue and slightly crushed. "From the day we met. Remember, Daddy?" "How could I forget?" Silas smiled, lifting Miles onto the counter despite Daria's mock protests about health code violations. "That was the day our story really began." "No," Harper corrected, wise as ever. "It was the day our story got its missing ingredients, like when a recipe needs just a little something extra to make it perfect." Miles, more interested in the pastries than family history, reached for a cinnamon roll. "Can I have one before school?" "What's the magic word?" Daria asked. "Ça please." He batted eyes that were somehow a perfect blend of his mother's warm brown and his father's storm cloud blue. "Harper says sugar is just love in crystal form." "Oh, she does she?" Silas laughed. "And what other baker's wisdom has your sister been sharing?" "That the best recipes are the ones that tell stories," Harper answered, arranging fresh flowers in the window displays. "Like how these cinnamon rolls tell the story of Mom teaching you love, and how Mama D's cookies tell the story of finding us, and how everything we bake has a little bit of magic in it because it has a little bit of all of us." Daria felt Silas's arms wrap around her from behind, his chin resting on her shoulder as they watched their children, the wise girl who had brought them together, and the joyful boy who had helped them heal. "She's right, you know," he murmured. "About the magic. She usually is," Daria agreed, thinking of all the moments that had led them here. A chance meeting at Gate B23, midnight baking sessions, paper lanterns in the rain, and a little girl who had believed in love enough for all of them. The bell above the door chimed as their first customer of the day entered. Another morning at Rise and Bloom was beginning, another day of creating sweet moments and sharing stories through sugar and flour and love. "Fudge ready?" Silas asked, the same question he'd been asking for 5 years, always with the same deeper meaning. Ready for this life, this love, this beautiful, complicated, perfectly imperfect family they'd built. Daria looked at her family, Harper teaching Miles how to fold napkins into flowers, Silas already heading to fix the temperamental espresso machine, the morning sun painting everything in shades of promise. "Ready?" she answered, the same way she always did. "I've got everything." Above them, the bakery's sign caught the morning light, Harper's intertwined flowers seeming to dance in the golden glow, and somewhere, perhaps, 2 spirits, a gentle mother and a dreamed-of baby, smiled down on the garden that had grown from their love, blooming ever stronger in the light of new days and second chances. Based on this emotional journey of healing, love and second chances, I'd like to ask a deep question for reflection. If you found a cup of cold coffee in an airport, like Daria, what story of a fresh start could she tell? Sometimes the new chapters of our lives begin in the most unexpected places, when we are about to give up. What was your cold coffee, that seemingly ordinary moment that changed everything. Your participation in the channel is very important. Please leave your opinion in the comments. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and comment your thoughts. Your participation is very important to us. See you next time.